Hello ladies, gentlemen, and others. My name is Dan, the voice behind that Kaito Dan, and welcome to my review for RWBY Volume 9 Episode 4, A Cat Most Curious. But before we get started, please make sure you watch the episode first on Crunchyroll to support the show and the fantastic people behind it. Plus, dodge them spoilers like it's bad secondhand smoke. And let's dive right into the fandom corner because we got a lot of juicy stuff to talk about. Starting with some of you lot's comments on the last episode, such as AshenWolf16, who wondered if the world of Ever After is actively trying to make Neo the villain in this tale, thus the shocking events from last time out with a semblance. Meanwhile, Robert Mahadi made a clever note on the girls picking up some new chess-themed roles during the match with the Red Prince. And speaking of that content, Dwight Green suggested that Weiss's graceful Nevermore attack might be an additional callback to the last time a giant Nevermore wiped tons of gaming pieces off the board. Good thing then Weiss rolled a high enough number, huh? But man, that sure was a wild fight, and a really fun chapter in general that brought us another Ever After personality testing the RWBY girls physically and mentally, as well as the debut of their new Curious guide. Now though, the journey carries us into a new encounter, and a chapter that was quite highly anticipated amongst some of the RWBY. Cue us fans being both excited and nervous as heck. But were the RWBY right to be bigging up this new chapter as one worth watching, or was it all smoke and mirrors? Let's talk about it. So we open with the gang hot on the tail of their new companion, said tail having a good wander as much as the other half does. About to be expected of such an oddity in a world of oddities. The only thing more confusing is the Curious Cat's particular fondness for clever wordplay, which makes even the attempt of asking its name a mental flip just to work around, much less trying to get Curious to lead RWBY and the others to the tree when, as we heard in the trailer, apparently Curious is the only one who can bypass the rule that the tree must come to you. Instead, it can actively go to the tree whenever it so feels like it, which it doesn't. Its curiosity over that place having already been satiated after being there before. Now already, you get the sense of what kind of character Curious is going to be, and the positives born from it. A guide whose support doesn't come easy, but any frustrations to be had from the viewer is replaced by the fun in seeing the girls trying to wrap their heads around Curious's quirks. Not to mention Robbie Damon's trademark charisma oozing out from his voice to perfection, giving the feline both an alluring and, well, Curious appeal to them that's hard not to love. It not wanting to go back to the tree has me pondering just how true the cat's reasoning is. I mean, seeing a sight already seen didn't stop the cat from entering the palace last episode, which can't have been its only time there just based on it helping Alex and not being treated like a stranger by the prince. Not to mention, it was quite quick to dismiss any further talk about going there. Almost like there's something, or someone, at the tree that they'd rather not cross paths with if they had a say in it. We also then see Curious chase off after the yellow butterfly that was seen a few times last episode. And this gives me a chance to mention a theory that I forgot to bring up in my last review, that admittedly a lot of other people are also jumping on too. That this yellow butterfly is actually Jean. Much like how many of us think the blue butterfly is Alex. It's clear at this point that pretty much everything we in the cast see during this adventure has a purpose. Nothing happens without cause, so there has to be something to this yellow butterfly if we keep seeing it. And that theory myself and others seem to have right now is perhaps this is a remnant of Jean after he became the Rusted Knight. Like perhaps it's the embodiment of what's left of Jean after this transformation, creating a literal butterfly effect, if you will. Think of it like how, spoiler if you're not a Kingdom Hearts fan, you have Terra, someone whose body got split from his heart, which took shelter inside of Terra's armor, creating the fittingly named Lingering Will. In that sense, maybe this butterfly is Jean's lingering will, most likely all of his pain regarding having to kill Penny, failing to protect his friends, Pyrrha, Beacon, his woes living up to his family's legacy, all of it. All of these negative elements that got ripped from Jean's aura and took shape in the form of a butterfly, meek and frail but still alive, whilst the reforged Jean Arc is free from these pains but is now just a cold, quiet knight without a whole heart. If this is to be the case, then in turn the blue butterfly is definitely Alex, beyond just the similar blue colouring, and the emphasis on this fits in nicely with my belief that there is a part of us still in this world that's key to a lot of the other mysteries at play. And on the subject of Alex, Curious is soon wondering how the girls know of her, which Weiss outright says is because of the book that Alex seemingly wrote of her time in Ever After that became the fable known in present day, which I was a bit shocked to hear the heroes flat out reveal. Yes, they have already mentioned this world's ties to the book when they discussed it with Little, but I just felt that it would have been something that they tried to keep a secret from the more major characters of this world, like Curious, in case it led to some troublesome situations. After all, this world has already shown that it can react in special ways based on the humans inside it, and so too can the people living here. So what if a major Ever After inhabitant learned that they're also characters in a book, and this causes their roles to be warped, or maybe the acre they're in goes out of whack? That doesn't seem to be the case though if we're now telling Curious this. Then again, we are once more talking about Curious, perhaps the only person in this world who could learn such info and not have it affect the world around them since, as discussed before, they don't exactly follow this world's parameters. So I could just be worrying over nothing. And by the way, I got a small chuckle out of Yang applauding Weiss's burn to Curious. They've sure come a long way since their humor divorce back in Volume 2, and props as well to Blake and Yang protecting Little from Curious's taste buds. I don't care what I said about my bingo card. If anyone, especially Akechi the Catchy, tries to nibble up Little, I will go full Showtime on their ass. At this point, it's clear though that the girls need to find a way to get Curious on their tree questing cause. And I love that once more we have Blake the Bookworm as our literally source of understanding this world, and the story that's laid out for them to follow, using that aspect of a character as the perfect setup for knowing the best way to get Curious to lead them to the tree is to play to its thirst for anything it finds interesting, kinda like a carrot on a stick baiting with anything they can share about their world and their past adventures, so long as Curious keeps leading the way. Clever thinking on her part. She's really taken charge well in terms of leading the way, while Ruby's not quite on her leadership A-game. And it does also tie in well to a funny moment of Curious playing with Ruby's scroll. I wonder though if any of these pictures are going to stay on the phone once they return home, or maybe they'll disappear since it's technically images from what's basically a fictional world in a sense. However, the real meat from this bit comes in the next scene, where a bit of time has gone past since they were back on the road, and the girls are already starting to regret this plan of action because of all the questions that Curious keeps asking them, in what I'd like to call the Crewby's catty callbacks and callouts. Because oh lord, this whole portion of the episode is just full of meta references, a bit of self-roasting, and in particular, one very notable mention that I'm sure a certain face in our community flipped out over. Starting from the top, the discussion on Oscar and Ozpin sharing a body gets Curious's response of, "Ooh, that has some rather uncomfortable implications," a common point of discussion that many fans have shared in regards to Oscar's fate, the whole soul-fusing thing, and what it could potentially mean for the Rose Garden ship between Oscar and RWBY, which, me personally, I don't think will be an issue in the end, as I think the Oscar's pair's souls will split in the end anyway. But this is still something that hasn't stopped being a common point of discussion amongst the fans, even several volumes later, which then leads to Curious bagging as well on Atlas the Floating City, not really as another meta comment, but more so just using it as another jab at the reincarnation process by comparing it to something else rife with flaws and not best thought out by those responsible. And the beats keep coming with this big swing in the form of freaking Ciel Soleil, Penny's old partner from the Vital Festival, getting mentioned for the first time since her one and only appearance way back in freaking December 2015, as the cat wonders if she ever made a return in a meaningful way, which, no, I just pointed out she only had one episode so far. Boy, have people been wanting to see her make more appearances, and indeed come back in a meaningful way. Especially Arnold, aka Murderer Birds. While partially just for the memes and fun of it, Arnold is one of many who has hoped to see Ciel come back and express complaints that she didn't appear at all during our time in Atlas, let alone get mentioned. And I myself have also found this to be a small but noticeable oversight on the part of the writers. After all, while Ciel is by all accounts a very minor supporting character, she did have a fun, strict time habit quirk, a cute design, and was Penny's partner during the tournament. She had a memorable scene and notable connections with a character that was coming back in a big way, and she had her fans. So surely that's enough to at least earn her a brief moment of interacting with the new Penny, just to reflect on the past or someone explaining where she is to excuse her absence. But neither thing happened. Now all of a sudden she gets mentioned here simply as a shout out to Arnold and anyone else who's felt the same. And you know what? I couldn't help but laugh and like it. It's totally unexpected and cleverly intertwined with Curious's blunt yet quizzical nature. And I do always love when a show finds a creative way to shout out their fans within the product, especially like this, which I know got a lot of people to chuckle big time, Arnold aside. And look, I'm sure some people will look at this moment and think it's actually a bad thing, like it's a sign that RWBY are aware of their faults and instead of fixing the problem, they turn it into a joke. But for me, I just see it as the writers looking at Curious's fascination over Remnant and seeing it as a chance to give us fans a little wink and nod by mentioning one specific character-related complaint that was a shame, but by itself was not a major issue, making it one of the easiest complaints to turn into a playful reference and roast, compared to the many bigger complaints that would have been much more ill-fitting for such a bit. Like say if Curious asked Blake what the treatment she got at Atlas was like as a Faunus when the lack of Faunus racism material was a large complaint during that arc. You can't really spin that into some kind of playful jab lest you come off like you're teasing the fans for a justified big critique. This, by comparison, never came off like it was the writers bringing this complaint up just to mock the fans. Instead, it was more like their way of saying, hey, we do listen to you, and while it's too late to do anything major to make up for Ciel's absence right now, we hope you like us addressing it as a shout out to you guys and us openly accepting the L, whilst still leaving the door open for Ciel to make a more meaningful appearance later on if the RWBY ever do find a way to do so properly, which I appreciate beyond the comedic aspect of this bit. And besides, is it really that different than, say, in Volume 6, when Nora was happy to finally be leaving that much maligned Haven house after all the time that they were benched there during Volume 5? That too was a fandom complaint referenced in the show, and the writers decided to use it for a later scene's benefit as Nora's own commentary and a passing funny line that most folks did like, just like this one. It shouldn't be seen as a bad thing for the writers to listen to the fans and find a way to have it benefit a later scene, even as a passing line or a joke. Heck, this even ties into a later comment from Curious, also playfully self-ribbing the writers over just how many characters they've had to keep track of and use over the course of the show, something we've heard the RWBY admit is an issue they've struggled with. And you can look at this volume already as a sign that they are trying their best to utilize the right amount of characters in fair amounts. Then, after one last meta rib, this time on the character voices, which, hey, it's still far better now than it used to be early on, let's be fair here, the subject of Remnant's past leads to Curious noting they know more about it than Alex ever did. Apparently she was too busy trying to see past her own nose and focusing on more trivial things. Basically meaning she was all about herself, less so the world and people around her. More signs that Alex maybe never truly grew despite what is claimed in her story, and Ever After is still feeling the effects of this outcome, unable to finish its story. Thus we have older sly merchants, bratty princes, and, well, we'll get there in a moment. For now though, we actually get a welcome bit of world building about the acres themselves as they arrive at the next bridge. Turns out, the acres were made specifically for its inhabitants and their roles. I guess this explains such details as why the mice would be able to use the vines to hunt down enemy prey besides nabbing cheese plants, or why the toy figure civilians live in a simple woodland town based on games, fittingly as well being mostly shops, which is perfect for any travelling merchants. But this has also risen my theory that the Ever After is another world made by the two deities, because this just sounds like another one of their beautiful experiments they casted aside like they did with Pre-Remnant. Maybe Ever After originally began as an experiment focused on what a world would be like if everyone had their own role that they must always live their lives by in domains that perfectly fit to them. If so, it'd make for a pretty decent contrasting element to what Pre-Remnant was and still kind of is, a wider world that is open to all, though still segmented only by kingdoms, and the world only changes through the actions of humanity who have freedom and magic in hand. This could mean then that Remnant followed after Ever After, as it was deemed a failure, and would explain why falling out of Remnant would lead you here. It's the previous link in the chain of events created by the gods. At this point, I just really want to see the gods or learn more about them again, because I want to know what presence they do truly have on this place, if at all. But back on track, the gang is now heading to the Garden Acre, a giant forest that looks like Balloon Leaf from Pokemon Sword and Shield when Dynamaxed. But this is where we get a Groger parfait apparently to unshrinkify the tinies, which, by the way, I got a laugh from Wise Blake and Yang being listed as tiny versions of themselves in the credits. Now that's a little detail I appreciate. What I don't appreciate though is Curious's rather disconnected understanding of the emotions that is tied to what's going on in Remnant, leading to a rather heavy and hopefully accidental slap of reality to RWBY that causes her to slow to a stop. Unable to think about how, while they're here dealing with talking shapeshifter cats, a bratty prince, and parfaits, Salem is now halfway to destroying the world, needing just 2 more relics, and what's worse, they all can't do anything to help everyone who is suffering right now. It's a bitter pill to swallow, and the music fading out as this painful thought slips into girls' heads is a nice touch for what has to be the first time each of them are now realizing this since the fall, since it wasn't that long ago, but they've been distracted by everything else going on in the Ever After. And wouldn't you know it, once more RWBY gets to bottle up these feelings rather than open it up and vent in a healthy way, because even before Blake can finish suggesting that they try not to think about home right now, we gotta look for the other cat once more. At least with every new dodge of some much needed RWBY therapy, we get one step closer to its arrival. Anyway, before the next cat hunt begins anew, Weiss's growing frustrations with Curious leads to her wishing that their guide was some of the other characters from the fable, namely the lively carpenter, which she described as sweet, and the rusted knight, whom she called handsome. This is the first time we've heard of the carpenter, and while you might assume that this is actually the name of the mysterious figure we've seen working at the smithy, I don't think so, since blacksmithing and carpentry are 2 different types of work. One is with metal, and the other with wood and textiles. So, who is it then? Well, I think it's someone that was shown off in the trailer that I feel a lot of us have actually forgotten about seeing. The bird with a hat. Something about that type of hat feels more like a carpenter's choice of fashion, and they pop up in a marketplace that is also fitting for someone with this job. So I think the lively carpenter will be this guy. As for the rusted knight, Weiss's flattering comment is quite funny considering who we all assume is under that helmet. And if that is indeed Jean, and his transformation into the knight didn't do anything to his actual appearance, I really want to see now how Weiss gets excited to see this handsome knight in person, only to find out it's the boy that she infamously had to reject a lot back in Volume 1. Though I hope as well it doesn't put her off any future bonding moments with Jean, as that's a dynamic that I'd love to see explored more given the pair's maturity and growth over the series. Anyway, the girls' search for Curious means another notable diversion, as an odd humming sound leads them to a pile of leaves with someone inside, asking what are they? A question I and Ruby are both starting to be a little tired of hearing at this point. At least here it leads to a funny reverse usage from the girls as they are spooked by the person inside being Ever After's version of Alice in Wonderland's Caterpillar, or in this case, the Herbalist. And they are voiced by Christopher Guerrero, known for characters like Overlord's Ainzul Gown, Gecko Moria from One Piece, and Ichiya Vandalay Kotobuki from Fairy Tail. He also played the Mistral Blacksmith from Volume 4, so that's now 2 returning VAs alongside Lucy Christian as Little. And what a fascinating character to come back with. Definitely something that is a little bit freaky at first with its insectoid form and raspy voice, but the Herbalist, or Herb for short, isn't a monster. Just someone who seems a bit stressed out of being constantly asked for help recently. Possibly a clue that Jean has already arrived and asked for his help. And he does offer to help the girls as he invites them into his mushroom home. Mushroom. Crack myself up. But yeah, this is his place. The same setting that we saw in early preview images, so there goes all those theories about this being a weird place tied back to Alex. But Herb is content with helping the girls with making a Groger parfait. However, he sees their hesitancy around him and ponders what exactly they are. Ruby wisely saying Huntresses instead of humans, given what happened the last time she said the latter around someone of this world. Thing is, Herb doesn't know what a Huntress is and what they do, not helped by Ruby's confusion over why this matters, muddling her explanation with zero conviction, and it's only when Blake clarifies with a firm answer of them being heroes who protect those who can't protect themselves that this satisfies Herb's question, only for him to ask a new one. Are the girls good Huntresses? Which, given Ruby's forlorn expression, the poor girl isn't exactly sure of right now. More signs of her hope really haven't taken a hit lately. But why is this topic so important? Well, it's apparently key to Herb's true intention beyond just helping the minis get big again. For his role as a herbalist is to provide medical aid that helps others carry onward in their journeys. And right now, he sees the girls in need of far more than just a parfait to be who they wish to become. First, they need to understand who they are now. Quite a thought-provoking sentence, especially with some of them having quite the conflict of self-identity right now and in the past, and I couldn't help but be drawn into Herb's dialogue. He's easily the most straightforward of helpful aides that the girls have met so far, even with his layered comment of his, and it makes for a nice grounded refresher after dealing with sly bartering, aggressive opposition, and suspicious playfulness. That being said, he is still mysterious in his own way, dropping some intriguing comments like when he sighs and says, "This is how a king becomes a prince." So wait, did the Red King turn into the Red Prince? He didn't die or disappear like we were meant to believe before? That's a surprising turn of events, especially since he didn't try to clarify being the king when Weiss mistook him for it. So yeah, I guess Alex's actions, either in their encounter or whatever she has done later on, affected After right now and caused the king to revert back to being a kid. Ironically, the opposite of how Jinxie was described as being older than they're expected to be. So, as if we weren't already dealing with some wibbly-wobbly timey-wimey nonsense with the timing of the Falling Lot's arrival, now we've got multiple people dealing with their time out of whack. Now I'm beginning to wonder if, when the gang leave this place, maybe we will indeed have a weird ripple effect in the timeline back in Remnant. Either it's like they never left and time resumes as normal, or maybe they were gone for a longer period of time and we have a time skip. As if that wasn't potentially problematic enough, I don't care how inviting the caterpillar is or how good Chris's voice work is, you would never see me be convinced to step inside a stranger's back room full of hookahs. Place must smell like every druggy uni student dormant room turned up to 11. No, thank you. But it's too late to back out now, with Herb forcing the girls to stay for a big old smoky mental trip, after Herb blows a ton of it into their faces, his body flashing colors while he asks once more, "What are you?" He needs them to truly understand the people they are now so they can then be shown who they hope to be in the future. And to do that, they need some help from within. So down goes each of the girls, each of them lost in their own hazy backdrop away from the others, before being joined by themselves, younger versions from around the early Beacon era, who confront their present-day versions with some very choice words and proposals, all centered on the same thing: changing into someone else and leaving behind who they are now, taking on a more peaceful, stress-free life instead of continuing down this current path that's given them all so much strife, and they very well keep at it. Going one by one with the three starting off, Yang's doppelganger says, why not just go back to being whole? Why go forward carrying losses as part of who you are when it's better to just be who you used to be before all this? Someone whose only drive was living each day as it comes, not worrying about anything else beyond the next thrill, over trying to become stronger to make up for any pains inside and out. Meanwhile, Fake Blake suggests living as either a human or a faunus, no more trying to act as the bridge between the two and dealing with the struggles of wanting to bring the two races together that comes with it. Instead, maybe just live a much simpler life, and that is one of someone whose responsibility is given to anyone else while they are just being able to live in content. And then, Weiss, ironically the second time in recent months she's had to deal with an internal conflict with an alternate version of herself, has said copy tout the current broken state of the Schnee name to be the perfect excuse to cast it and the name's legacy aside to become a nobody. Someone free of any of the baggage such a connection has, which has brought Weiss so much pain all this time. Instead, she and the others can live a free life, a simple life, a whole life. Each of these gets offered to the current self in a rather unsettling yet still deeply engrossing moment, especially since we know just how much everything they're saying does have merit. The three of them have each indeed had to deal with a lot of misery, burdens, and hopelessness over the years because of these ideals or motivations. And what's more, this is a clear callback to the last time these three specifically had a similar discussion, the night of their trip to Mountain Glen, where Oobleck's questions led to the girls having to confront what exactly drives them. What does being a Huntress mean to them personally? And do they truly have the conviction inside them to make their goals become a reality, in spite of it being a path rife with uncertainty and challenges? That was one of my favorite scenes from that volume that did a lot in making each of the girls gain some welcome complexity. There was layers to what defines them being brought to the surface, as the show was making a point to highlight these aren't the complete package yet. There's plenty in need of growing, and it'll come only if the girls remain steadfast in taking up this path of a Huntress and treating it more than just a job. Only then will they have the clarity and belief that was lost in them during that campfire chat, which I was very excited to see being set up all that time ago. So, as you can imagine, I was over the moon then to see us finally reach this pivotal moment in their personal journeys where it gets called back. A lot of time has passed since then, with each girl having faced adversity tied back to these core aspects, often leading to more misery and doubts, but they've overcome them and had to learn how to reach this point now in spite of it. And in a brilliant understanding of these characters and their arcs, they each resoundingly reject these new paths that is offered to them with zero hesitation. In its place is that conviction and understanding that was absent back in Mountain Glen, resulting in what I feel is one of the most powerful scenes in the entire series for many reasons. It's not just a simple no, it's a full-on proud declaration of defiance against anything that tries to shake their wills. Speeches pulled deep from within that on their own speak the same resounding message of assurance becomes all the more satisfying when you focus on the personal aspect for each of them. With Yang, she speaks of everything bad she's gone through as something that is just as much a part of who she is as anything good she's experienced, because it helped her shape into who she is now. Someone strong enough to keep going rather than giving up, using the pains of the past not as a cause to shy away, but to improve so they don't repeat. Much like Yang's semblance, she used it as fuel for her fire, and that fire isn't ready to die out just yet. A facet that has always defined Yang and drawn me to her character that I'm super pleased get emphasized this well in a moment big and important for the clarity of the character. What's more, I deeply respect the writers having her say that anything that might be missing from her that's getting in the way of Yang becoming her best, happiest self isn't because she lost it, it's because she hasn't found it yet, and the only way she can keep going, moving forward, is by just accepting these elements to her. Words of assured belief that she'll keep seeing herself as a whole in spite of her turmoil, and believe that she's able to do what she can to feel that way again carries a lot of weight for someone who's had to deal with so much taken from her. And it also thankfully doesn't treat Yang losing an arm as something that makes her less than normal. Speaking as someone with a social disability, it means a lot to hear such things be accepted as something that is simply a part of who we are. And in Yang's case, she even sees her prosthetic not as a replacement, but still her arm. This is where the feels begin to grow strong in me, and unsurprisingly, it can only continue to grow as the scene went on. Because then, we have Blake refuse to live a simpler life because, much like Yang and her pains, she understands what has helped shape her identity, the good and bad she's had to face because she carries her friends, her family, and her culture so strongly in her heart. It feels too much like betrayal to give up on trying to make a better world that she can enjoy alongside everyone else if she chose to run away simply because the burdens were too much. And heck, the fact that becoming that bridge example for others to follow is something she refused to give up, it only shows just how much it means to her if she's still willing to persevere through more strife just to see it through. Another great speech, especially since she is the one who has struggled the most with constantly running away already when things got hard, and we saw her be miserable back in Menagerie when she actually did. Though, if you would ask me which of these speeches is perhaps the best, I think it's gotta be Weiss's. The Ice Queen not only dismissing her copy as being the same as her, but openly proclaiming her legacy that is broken even still being a part of who Weiss Schnee is, because it all comes back to what has been her core drive for years now. Living a life where the only one who will define what her name means to her is Weiss. Not the fact that she's the granddaughter of a hero and the daughter of a villain. Not that her glorious kingdom is now left in ruins. Nor the company that she once proudly wore the title of heiress for is also gone. Because right now, Weiss Schnee is already a free girl. but she refuses to let it be because she let failures be the cause of how her goals culminates. Instead, she wants it to be by her own merits, especially when her ideals, her desire to right the wrongs in her life, and her drive to shape the future how she sees fit remains unbroken. All of this bold, unwavering faith made plain in a brilliantly worded and performed speech befitting a noble heart forged in adversity like Weiss. All of this then comes to a head as Weiss, Blake, and Yang all proudly say they are indeed a Huntress. Not because it's their job, but because it's a part of who they are that is central to how they aim to go forward in their goals. And unlike that campfire chat, they each are resolute in this understanding, no longer feeling like it's something they just have to manage alongside their own wants and desires. No, they are using it to also spur themselves forward by using its ideals, importance, and impact on the world to influence their personal aims, making for the perfect capping off point for a scene that I genuinely adore to death. I am a big sucker for those crossroad of destiny type scenes, and there's just so much to enjoy from this example, even beyond the emotionally charged performances and the meaningful dialogue. For one, while this is a moment where the girls showcase their resolve and how far they've grown up until now, I'm glad to see that it never forgets to stress that they are still growing, and they are each aware of this. Very important to avoid giving off any sense that this is as far as the girls' development will go for the rest of the series. No, there's still a long way to go, and we should be excited to see it. There's also the strength in the presentation. Pretty much every shot has something to say that helps elevate what's being discussed. The girls drawing out their weapons, part of who they are, as more proof of their promise to keep fighting on. The limited backdrop creating an uncomfortable energy that draws all your attention to the two figures in the center. Then the way the younger selves are also voiced and animated closer to how they were during this period, to really sell them as true reflections of simpler days. The camera work alone is also on top form, my personal favorite elements being the contrast that they utilize. When the scene has the copies in control, the transitions are sharp cuts between mostly off-balance angles, and the next copy's lines leading into the switch before the real girl's resolve is matched with beautifully smooth transitions like the spinning one, and their close-up showing their whole face so we can see every detail conveying their conviction, whereas the copies just had their deceiving mouths be the only features shown prominently. And finally, you had that lovely music piece that builds from faint to imposing and then heroic as the final cherry on top. It's so gratifying seeing these three have such a landmark moment be this well crafted after all these years watching them rise and fall. And on a personal level, there is a lot that I relate with as well, having gone through my own internal debates where negative feelings on my disability, my losses, my identity, and so on shook my resolve for a spell that I had to overcome, much like the girls, earning this scene as a very special feeling of personal investment that honestly left me rather shook up after watching the episode. And any scene that can make me feel that in tune with the characters on such a deep level has to be doing something right worth praising. So yeah, massive props to everyone involved in this scene, and I expect payment for my medical bill within the week. Funny thing though is I haven't mentioned RWBY yet, and that's its own emotional powder keg full of quality drama and introspection, as right from the off, they go from the perfect mood whiplash of going right from the girls at their emotional strongest to RWBY at her emotional weakest, crestfallen on the floor looking down as the inspiring music is now gone, and in its place is just the words of RWBY's own smoky copy trying to break her already fragile spirit, asking if RWBY is now like the heroes in the books that she read as a kid and idolized, making it for inspiration for her own approach to being a hero, just as she said to Blake all that time ago back in Volume 1. Ironic that this time present RWBY is the one that is echoing Blake's sentiment that life isn't like a fairy tale, which RWBY did agree with back then. She just saw it as more reason to do her part in making it better. Whereas RWBY here doesn't have that self-confidence anymore that she can indeed make a difference. Not helped by her copy being noticeably more harsh in its dialogue, less so trying to tempt RWBY to take its way out of her strife, and more like trying to shame her into giving up. It's quite unsettling hearing such cold intent behind RWBY's chipper smile and Lindsay just nailing that unnatural edge in RWBY's usual bright-eyed vocal tone. Plus, there's more of that engrossing comparison detail with the Mountain Glen scene, only strengthening the focus on the fall in RWBY's psyche. Now she's the only one unsure of who she is, and what is the best course of action in life to take, while the others are where she was, assured and motivated, which is just as much as a reward to see unfold as it was with the others. The best thing though, is this is the first real instance now we get to see RWBY have to come face to face with everything she's tried to bottle up over the years, as I've waxed lyrical on in pretty much every review this volume so far. It's almost like Ever After itself and its deep resonating with RWBY is trying to play with more than just the weather controls based on her emotions, which isn't easy when you're being reminded of your constant failures, the burden you've placed upon yourself to always help others over yourself, and the unstoppable force that killed your mum / person you idolized and based so much of your own Huntress identity off of. This is no doubt meant to set up the eventual recovery point for RWBY as well as the breaking point that she realizes she needs to take inspiration from her team in using such pains as a cause to keep going, on top of feeling that she can confide her pains outward more often if she's got others willing to listen and stand by her. Problem is, she doesn't get any time to stew on this for long, as the mists get cleared by the arrival of Curious, freeing them all from Herb's hallucinations and ending this monumental sequence. A shame, but I definitely get the sense that we've only just begun to tip the scale towards that eventual breaking point for RWBY. The more Ever After is now starting to really try and mess with her head, which I can't wait to see. And speaking of things I'm glad to see, in the meantime, it's good that Curious is actually helpful in a positive, less mischievous way. It's still unsure how untrustworthy they're gonna be in the long run, but the fact that he did return to help the girls is a point in his favor for now. Same for that concern being shared with Herb, who he seems to be friends with, judging by their worried tone and expression. Curious also does the same gesture he did with the Red Prince, with his energy reaching out to someone else's heart, the cat outright saying he is offering some of his heart to help Herb return to a more at peace mentality, rather than being in this problematic state where his helpful approach with the girls is actually causing more harm than good. I thought that this moment with the prince was just a symbolic thing, not him actually alleviating the prince of his raged emotion, but nah, it turns out it's actually a power of the Curious Cat, which I think will mean that we're gonna see how Jean's fractured heart in the future will be made whole, maybe even RWBY's as well, though I hope both these situations don't have just Curious's power be the only reason the pair's heart recover. Not quite sure though why after this, Herb then suddenly drops into a hole in the floor without any setup or explanation. It could just be he wanted some time alone after being in a weird state, but then again I ask why do so suddenly when he's currently got guests who help cap off the episode with honestly the most understandable look of confusion possible. Yeah, that was a bit of a jarring way to end the episode, especially on the back of such a blockbuster and vital scene for all these characters, which again could have benefited from just a simple explanation. And heck, while I'm here in my final thoughts portion now, I kinda want to build off this to discuss some other small downers that I had for this episode. Namely, while this episode will undoubtedly be seen as iconic for one reason in particular, I do think it's kinda backloaded in terms of its truly worthwhile material. Don't get me wrong, I did love this first portion with the girls and Curious starting their new dynamic on a funny note that also brought the cat up to speed with some funny major story beats and snappy dialogue, and Curious themselves being so easy to watch that never left me bored, but at the same time, it's a lot of meta jokes the cat's charismatic whimsy, and not much else that had the same wealth of major story importance as the stuff we got in the second half. Some more meat on the bone with, say, another scene with Neo, or more world building on Ever After and its acres would have been appreciated to make this episode have more to offer long term. Otherwise, it's still just a really charming opening half that's overshadowed by what follows it, and how it feels like that is the big piece of this volume's puzzle, not the first half. And that's really my only major gripe this episode had, beyond maybe some of the "what are you" stuff being overplayed just a little. Perhaps it could have been streamlined so confusion remains, but the phrase doesn't get repeated ad nauseum. But that's still a small dent in an otherwise still incredible chapter, even if it is carried by just one scene. And what a scene it was. I'm sure it will gain even more praise down the line as we see how the girls fare following their respective discussions, but in this moment, it truly was something special, as I made quite clear by now. A sequence where every gear to the machine was working flawlessly in the writing, visuals, and audio to gift us fans with a moment so powerful within its own bubble, and so promising for what it is setting up ahead of time. And with that, it's also now time for the little details. No cats allowed. The banter with Weiss and Yang continues to be a ton of fun. They really do nail the straight man and Joker dynamics even when they are switching who's who. There's also the curious cat and how enticing it is by its own tail that he then uses to point to itself, and I gotta love how well that captures the oddball's quirks even with subtle animations like this, though it's not as cute as Weiss and Little hugging each other when Herb spooked them. Cool detail as well in having Herb, their guide between what you are now and what you aim to be, have a body that's the middle ground between a caterpillar and a butterfly. Way to have even the character's design capture their role as much of their actions. And finally, don't do drugs, kids. And with that, let's close this part of the book with my episode awards. And I doubt I even need to say who won the scene of the episode, it's that obvious. Character of the episode, mind you, I'm giving it to Curious. Like I said, it's hard to be bored watching him, and in this first proper outing for the character, I can already tell they're going to be a real highlight this volume, Robbie Damon being one of many reasons as to why that is the case, with his gripping charisma also helping him rightfully earn the voice acting gold star, though props as well to Christopher Guerrero and the girls all nailing their emotional beats on high notes. And with that, we come to the end of this long review. Another strong chapter, though slightly below the banger that was the previous one, at least for me. Again, the stuff at the start was a lot of fun, but this is a textbook example of an episode that's going to be remembered for just one scene, and for very good reasons. Still, I had a blast. And next up, it's the halfway point. So fingers crossed we will be here next review with me once again having plenty of positives to share instead of any bad vibes. But before we go, time for you to tell me your thoughts in the comments down below. Did you also find the first half get underplayed by the second half's strengths? Were you cool with the meta and fandom related jokes? Which of the girls' solo scenes was your favourite? And when do you think RWBY's breaking point will truly happen? Let me know in the comments down below, and while you're at it, hit the subscribe and bell buttons and tick the notification box to make sure you get every new video from me as they drop. And follow me on my social medias at ThatKaitoDan for more on anything to do with RWBY, updates on the channel, and more. But until next time, have a good day or good night, and peace out.